So the kavana, yichud havaya likim, but the kavana is both. We'll revisit this as we review the Maamar, but the kavana is the chidush in both the oir and the keli. But the mandate is the oir, is the keli. And it's in fixing the keli that the oir has its aliyah as well, but the emphasis is in the keli. Obviously, because by divine design, even though lagabe atzmos, they're both equal, but from our perspective, as God desires it to be, oir reveals him and keli conceals him. So the kavana is in the concealment. And he said within keli itself, malchus. And in malchus itself, this is the last point of the Maamar, there's two dargis in malchus. And for that matter, he traced back malchus in all of its expressions, even in malchus the Ein Sof. But in all of the levels of classic malchus, there is some gilui. The gilui is a kav, a limited gilui is a result that's filtered through malchus. So therein does not lie the kavana. In that kind of concealment, it still allows some kind of revelation. There was a beautiful arichas about that. But then there's the second level, as malchus descends, ragleha yordois moves, her feet descend, leading to death, or in death. And that's golus, that's transgression, and so on, a complete hell and behester. He explained these two, he translated these two states of malchus in the following two models. One is two ways of islapshus. One is where what dominates is the one that's the investor, the mashpia, and the other way is what dominates is the makabel. And the illustration for that is the first way is seichel amidus. In order for the amidus to emerge, and the seichel's mislabish, but the seichel doesn't disappear, because if you remove the seichel, then an awareness without the awareness in the mind, loving what? There's nowhere for it to go. So there has to be some modicum of, it can go on its own, then it's highly destructive. But for the midas to be as they should be, they need to be guided by the seichel. So the seichel is mislabish in the midah. But it's still guiding it. An even lower expression in this is, a very interesting example, is writing or art. So the physical hand is writing, it's mamish behelem. What's bagoli here is a physical act of putting pen to paper or the brush to the canvas, but behelem and guiding it, not disappearing totally. And in a very intimate way, the seichel is guiding the writing and the artwork. Even though to the viewer, bagolo, the seichel is completely behelem, even more so than in the midas model. But that's all a marshal for the first oifen of islapshus. All the levels of malchus up to, let's rephrase that, from malchus datzil is higher. But then as malchus descends into biyah, and particularly not just in bria, yitzir, but nasiya, so here it's golus. And the marshal for that, he says, is gilgulim, is an neshama that has been, that the Bezdin Shamayel has determined that its tikkun is to be in a behemoth, for example. It could also be, mind you, in anything else. And the neshama can be in this galgal in an inanimate object or a plant. The famous story of I told you the story with the L'chaim and the son for his father's yahrzeit and didn't make a bracha and dashed hopes of any tikkun and aliyah. But then, I think it was the Russian that gave him a tikkun. He was able still to redeem his father's tortured soul. That happens frequently. And that's the of Gilgulim. There's different kinds of Gilgulim, but that's the lowest kind of Gilgulim. Of course, the tzaddikim see who's where and what and guide us accordingly. So that is a way of what, where not like where the malbish, the one who's in clothes, dominates to some degree. Here, the meliubavitch completely dominates. And that which is invested in it is in absolute prison. That's a terrible tzad for the neshama. Not like Seichel Amidus, and it's not like the marshal of writing and so on. So, but herein, that's Golus, that's Shchinta B'Galusa. And he says that even in Golus, the Eibishter's Ratzon still is in its full force, he wants it to be good for Yid Nachtov Yisrael, not just Baruch but Gashmius, but because Elikus Malchus is Nimshach through the Ayin Sorim, it could be, otherwise, God forbid, Shchinta B'Galusa, that it doesn't go well, not Begashmius and not Baruchnis. So likewise, he's concluded, he said, all right, this was all Friday, yeah. He said that in the Slapshus or Nefesh Elikis and Nefesh Elikis and in the Guf, and Nefesh Bahamis, there's two general ways. The first is the Nefesh Elikis is Moishe v'Sholet, that's the Tzaddik, or even the Beinani. At the end of the day, Nefesh Elikis wins out. Lower than that, it's this, they're pitted against each other, and the Nefesh Elikis does not have the upper hand because sometimes, etc. The Rebbe will not elaborate, but sometimes Nefesh Bahamis actually holds sway and wins the day or the moment. And worse than that is a matzav where overall Nefesh Elikis is Bagolus. The person's life is dominated by Nefesh Bahamis, period. And that's the greatest form of Golus. That's we're up to Ois Vav. Let's continue. Ois Vav, the last page. Yeah. So the good news of the Maimer is that the whole Tachlis HaKavana is taka that. Is Tikkun HaKelim and Malchus in its lowest state. So never mind, there's no room for despair. This is the Kavana. And this is all to say that this is what's meant by Yichud Havai Elikim. This is what the Zohar means, that this is the primary mitzvah. Let's see it in the words of the Maimon, and then we'll revisit the whole thing and understand. This is a very avoided Maimon. A lot of it is addressed to the scholar of it, but the whole point of it is of this lofty Yichud Havai Elikim that a Yid has to know, b'chalal u'b'frat. This is the whole avoid, and this in the end will explain the apparent contradiction in the pasuk. Are we speaking transcendence or immanence? Kulchem, or what? Rashechem Shiftechem. Kulchem is Havaya, Rashechem Shiftechem is Elikim, Protim. And the whole point is no, Atem Tzavayim Kulchem, Rashechem Shiftechem, all the way down to the Shev Mimecha v'Chetevitzecha. Yadu Yavel Chetevitzecha v'Shev Mimecha. Because Yichud Havai Elikim, that's the whole Kavanah. That's overall. Now to translate this in Avodah, that's the whole point of the Maimon. But let's finish it. So just having finished describing now the descent of Malchus, the lowest level of his slapshus, of Malchus's descent of Shchinta B'Galusa, of a Yid who is in a matzav with Nefesh Bahamis controls things. So that's where the Ikar Tikkun has to be. That's the whole Avodah. B'Bchinas HaYoseh Tachtoina. The Haino, the greatest Gvul behind the Svidus and Malchus K'mei Shagla Yedis Moves. Nor in Malchus is L'maylo. But Dafka, she descends to death. Chatoim. V'gam kin being Tikkun HaGuf Nefesh Bahamis. And also, that was speaking about the Shechina. On the personal level, the Tikkun of Guf Nefesh Bahamis, Sha'ikar Bezehu, that the main Avodah, there is the Avodah of the Nefesh Elikis, The paradox is the avodah of the nefesh elikis cannot happen if the nefesh elikis is busy with nefesh elikis. Then she'll never have her aliyah. That's the paradox here, that the whole avodah, because it doesn't go into this maamer, but in other maamorim of the Rebbe, it comes out that the tachlis is the nefesh elikis, not the guf nefesh bahamis. But as we've learned many times, how's that achieved? By the nefesh elikis putting itself aside and devoting it to the tikkun of the guf nefesh bahamis. Therein lies its ultimate union with Hashem. In that setting, that's dira b'tachtonim. The Atem revealed and reflected in the Tachten, in every aspect of creation, its lowest stratas and levels. But what's the kavanah of the house? Again, is not the bricks and mortar, or even the final decorations, which are expressive of the ones who live in it. That's not the kavanah per se. It's the ones who live in it, but they should be reflected. The essential union is only true when it's reflected in the minutiae of life. Then the atzmistic connection is not expressed. So the kavanah is the nefesh elikis. But in this maamer, he speaks about the avodah. The avodah, what do you be focusing on? Shlichus. Avodah, that's what the end of the day, you're the kavanah. But you're the kavanah when you're not concerned with you being the kavanah. Or you're concerned with you being kavanah only in as much that that's because here's what his kavanah is, but still. But upon him, in practical terms, the nefesh elikis has its aliyah again when it's devoted to the mesiras nefesh and its devotion to the tikkun of guf nefesh bahamis. That's the focus. That's the matorah. That's the mandate, the mission statement. The kavanah is the nefesh elikis. So as he goes on to say, the big chiddush is in the oil and nefesh elikis. That's at the end of the day, it's the big chiddush. But the mandate is in the guf. Of course, it's a big chiddush that Atzilus and the Olam is Insof get completely transformed. You would have thought that everything is perfect. They're completely transformed through Giloy Atzmos Dafke in the Tachten. The Tachten's got to be fixed. Everybody agrees, to one degree or another. It's not such a big chiddush. It's the hardest work, in a way. But upon him, to summarize, that's the mandate. The mandate is be busy with tikkun tachten, with our lowest elements, and to break it and transform it. That the ikir of kavanah is generagla yerdis mavis malchus the shechina dafka in this world, in the guf nefesh bahamis, and its lowest state. And here is the yichad avaylikim david is in the kelim beikir. Shaloiti, the what are we true? The first thing is that there shouldn't be atnua the ruach behema yeredes lamata, this drawn downwards constantly in akshama to break that pattern and to bring into our lives a level of edelkeit, of refinement, of aspirations for something higher. And moreover, as we learned elsewhere, is to find delight in that and fulfillment there. That the kelim, rather than descending ever downwards, should ascend in a bittul and a surrender and a desire for likus. Now this began, he said, it can't happen in Golus itself per se. It started in Golus, at the very end of it. First, it started with Achilas Matzah, the mitzvah of Matzah, Lechem bin Haaretz, earthly bread, which means so this is the Avodah, the Seichel and Midas, To understand the beauty of Elikos, to meditate about life, what's the purpose? It can't be only this, to see Hashgacha Pratis. It's accessible within Teva itself. You toil the earth, you produce the bread, you can achieve it on your own, and it's sustaining and nourishing. That's the beginning of the Avodah, the first mitzvah, Achilas Matzah. But then, Achilas Man. Then there's the Avodah of eating the heavenly bread, Lachem and Shemayim. It's bread, and the good for eating and being nourished by it. What is that? So he says, this is an Avodah of Ava, of the desire of the heart that comes from as a gift from above, that comes through the toil of the Avodah, first of Bechol, the Vav Chevachol Nafshecha, that's Lachem min ha'oretz. To the extent of Bechol Ma'etcha, Shenichel Ba'etzem Bechol Ma'etcha, which means extreme, beyond limit, that is incorporated within the Etzem, as we said before, Sev Gimel. What did he say, Sev Gimel? Spoke about the three levels of the Bittul Arotzoi to the Kalim, of the Kalim. The three dargas of Shabbos and the third darga of Shabbos. First, the Bitter Eichem B'tech P'Seiles, Eichem B'tech Eichel, and then no bitter at all, unity. That's why Shalashudas is no eating at all, in the same way that we eat Friday night and Shabbos day. Yeah, so that's the third, the ultimate bitter, the ultimate aliyah. Hine, yeah, we're continuing. You can ask you to close the door if you don't mind. Thank you. So he's summarizing now a little bit. They say that Avoid Malamata Lamaylo. So they say that Avoid is Shetchil Avoid Bekeches Pnimiyim. First is the Avoid in conscious. That's the bit of Psoilis of Eichem B'tech Psoilis. This is coming to a recognition, understanding that this behavior is intolerable and unacceptable, and understanding it. And that's the Avoid in Keches Pnimiyim, Seichel, Amidus. And then is the Avodah, that's B'chol Ravcha, B'chol Nafshecha. Then Akach Avodah B'derusa Deliba. And then there's the Avodah, which is a Matana L'mayla, of the desire of the heart. In that itself, the third level, Avodah Shemitzad Ha'etzem, complete bittul, complete oneness. Never takes us straight to the top. This till now is describing now the Avodah M'lamata L'mayla. However, it's very bekitzer, and the end of the mind, as you can see, is missing. So let's try and understand. So this was the Avodah M'lamata L'mayla. Tzarech li is gamin amshochem L'mayla L'mata. So this is an Avodah till now of successive levels of surrender. But there has to be also the amshochem L'mayla L'mata. So the Cha'ura, what he's referring to here is what he's spoken about at length in the beginning of the Maamar. The Chiddush in both the Keli and the Oy. The Chiddush in the Oy, of that is the Keli, which by nature is drawn downwards. The definition of Keli is, by definition, the more defined the boundaries, the better the Keli. That's what makes a good Keli. So you have the pearl in the Keli and Aliyah, which you just described now. Gufan Nefesh B'Ham is the Ava that starts first with Seichel, and then goes to the Liba, and then this is all Aliyah, this is all surrender. This is all the bittul of the Guf, the Iskafia, seems to hint to the Hishapcha. So that's the Aliyah, that's the Chiddush, that's the main Avodah. Now comes the second thing, the Aliyah and Nefesh Elikis, as it were, or the Chiddush in the Oir. What did he say is the Chiddush in the Oir? That the nature of Oir is Giloi, but he's dragging me down there. The nature of Oir is the Betano Shel Aliyah, Giloi, not to be drawn down. So the Chiddush is a Chiddush both in Havai and both in Alikim, both in Oir and Keli, mitzad the Pnimi Sakavon of Atzmos, that he said the Pnimi Sakavon is carried through, obviously, both in Oir and Keli, that even though in their overt nature, Keli is Amshocha and Oir is Aliyah, but the Pnimi Sakavon in both of them is unity, And that unity happens when each one behaves contrary to its nature through drawing, to expressing the kavanah pnimius. That's what he's coming to now. The second part, or the result of the primary and lifelong struggle with elevating our coarse nature. Then comes the המשך מלמעלה למטה. אומנם צריך גם בגין המשך למעלה למטה להמשיך את העבודה שמצד העצם בכיחס פנימי. This is מצד הנפש הליקיס, the avoid, as it were. Not a lot of arichas need to think about what this means practically. Let's say the words are nachem betrachten. I'm going to make a little exception here. Beis Hashem b'lindesh will be and have the koichas v'chulu. Ephraim started last Shabbos to share and shared with us that he had not really learned it through, so it was a beautiful presentation, but he said he'll continue. As we learn the Maimon and review it, I'm thinking, we could do this really every Maimon, but for some reason this Maimon, so I'm throwing it out there. Ephraim will lead the discussion, but I would like everybody to, because this is abstract and it'll be terrible if we just left this Maimon, Avaidalikim, Maisis, Oiris, and Kalim, this way, that way, arrows pointing, and that's the end of it. And then we're ready for the next Maimon. That would be a tragedy. A tragedy. Yeah. So what I'm asking is that everybody should think about this and share at the Fabrengen too. So Ephraim, you'll lead it. You'll lead the Fabrengen, but people should share what they have thought. What do you think? We're beginning of the week. We've got a whole week to think about this. Sounds like good. Get my glasses to see the distance. Yeah, getting a little wink and nod. As long as Ephraim leads it, okay. Well, he's already agreed. I just changed the deal a little bit, but the deal is a deal. What's that line in the same songs I'm quoting here? Leonard Cohen, the deal has been dirty since time began. Something like that. He needs an aliyah up there, so he wants us to mention him in the Maimon. We will need an aliyah. Okay, so let's continue. Atem Nitzovim kulchem. So going back to the beginning of the shail of the Maimon, l'chore, Rosh Hashanah is kulchem, and then it goes on to enumerate the various classes and so on. So now this is the whole Indian. The Rosh Hashanah says, the Targum says, Hayom goes on Rosh Hashanah, Yom the Din Rabbo. So that is She'oz Avoid Mitzad Etzem. So there the overt Avoid is Mitzad Etzem, Sheneshom, as you saw Nitzovim, Yidden stand firm. It also implies like one, it's one entity. And they ascend to the place from where they were hewn out, literally. As the pasuk says, "Liv ne'avayli kechem." He means even higher than avayli kechem. Canal, like we said in the beginning of the Maimon, the difference between the Kabbalah sale year round, the Kabbalah sale Rosh Hashanah, the Kabbalah sale Shebechol Hashanah. Kabbalah sale of every day, we're addressing specific aspects of our persona in specific mitzvahs, areas of life. It's every day is different avodah. Sunday is one avodah, Monday is another avodah. With each day itself, there's different avodas at work, at home, family, spouse. However, the avodah the Kabbalah says the Rosh Hashanah mitzad etzem, it's a general avodah from the very essence. Who am I? Where am I? To what am I? Am I devoted? To what am I devoted? It's hidden in the conscious faculties. So that thinking of what? Of Atem Nitzovim. Nitzovim implies we had it in mind. Nitzovim aliyah. It's also conveyed in the next word kulchem. One united as one mamish lefish mitzad ha'etzem leishayich lukim madreges. Because at the etzem level there are no distinctions. But then the pasuk goes on to say, no, it's not enough. You have to mamshich this in lamata. This is different than the surrender that he spoke about till now, which was the ikad of the maimed, the tikkun hakelim. Here is the second component. But the kavanah is that the neshama should pervade the koiches pnimiyim. This is the amshochem l'mayla l'mata. This is the chiddush in the oir, not aliyah, but descent. Shezeh oimrei roshechem shiftechem. That's what the pasuk says. Roshechem shiftechem. Shechoshev kanes madreges. He reckons the 10 levels. Shemes koiches apnimiyim. The 10 conscious faculties. Shegam heim. Shegam bahem ti amshachas etzem. Boom. End of the maimer. So this is strange. I don't know why. So it could also be because what does this mean? Not so readily understood, and it was forgotten. Whatever the reason, Yael's not around to ask him what happened. We see this happens often, relatively speaking, which leaves us more work. So this is what's on the table. On the table is to translate on a personal level. We'll review the Maimah tomorrow. The next day, we'll just go over what the Maimah says. On a personal level, these two avodas, the avodah with the kelim, that's pretty straightforward. But even that, there's 3 levels. Translate that in avodah, and translate, which is less clear because the Maimah doesn't elaborate. Of the etzem and the neshama in all the way down the etzem to the keiches pnimim and guf nefesh bahamis. This way, the oil lamata. Okay, that's the whole point of the Maimah. That's the yichud of Havai Likim, and that's the end of what the pasuk is saying. That even though today is the avodah mitzad the etzem, the pasuk is bringing it one side of the equation. Today is talking mitzad the etzem, but it has to be nimshach lamata. Okay, so but together we'll review, and then each one will daven, learn, and apply it personally.